All right, I think we can go ahead and get started now. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's Careers in Cannabis HR event. My name is Melissa, and I am the head of community here at Careers in Cannabis. If this is your first time attending one of our webinars, we host these each month, various industry topics ranging from hiring best practices to compliance and diversity, social equity topics presented by fellow professionals in the cannabis industry. We will wait till the end to open up the Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat and we will get to them within the last 15 minutes of the webinar. And if there is ever a topic that you wish to see presented at one of the events, or if you would like to present a topic yourself, please reach out to me. We always welcome new topics. Today we have Robin Debiase from Ascend Wellness and Jamie Mendola from Air Wellness, speaking on what board members expect from HR leaders in cannabis. Moderating today is Mike Siebold, and I will go ahead and turn it over to him to get started.
Well, we're also being joined by Jamie Mendola from AYR. Good morning, Jamie. How are you? Robin, it's good to have you here.
Sorry.
It's all right. It's exciting. I am excited too. My name is Mike Siebold from FlowerHire. FlowerHire, creating a conscious cannabis community one hire at a time. That's my daily plug. Today, we're specifically talking about the interaction of governance and HR. But before we get into the depth of that, I first would love to get to know our panelists. Robin, starting with you, tell us a bit about your path to cannabis and what you do now within it.
Sure. Hi, Mike. How are you? Hi, Jamie. Thank you guys for inviting me into this webinar. I've been a big supporter of FlowerHire and the crew there, as well as David Belsky. So for me personally, I've been in HR, I can't believe it, almost 30 years. It's hard to say that out loud, but, got my undergraduate degree in it. I grew up really in retail, wholesale, multi-unit HR, Circuit City back in the day, for those of you that remember that. Then I went over to Duane Reade for those New Yorkers, which is really pharmacy based. And that's when I really got into health and wellness, deep into the pharmacy world. From there, I went over to Walgreens for a couple of years, did a stint at Walgreens. Every New York girl wants to be in fashion. So I jumped off, went into fashion for 7 years, which was thrilling, but really not where my passion lied. And my passion really lied in health and wellness. Spent some time at Weight Watchers, WW. I was the head of HR for all the Americas. Very interesting in the weight loss program, what that looked like. Then I got into diabetes and I got into health and wellness, started going down really the medical route. And my brother, the plant's always connected to somebody that love, cherish, that this plant has helped them. My brother, throughout his life has had PTSD, anxiety, bipolar, was on medication for long periods of time, decided to try cannabis on, in the black market, the gray market. And that's when I got into the benefits of cannabis. Did a lot of research with him collectively, went and got his medical card, and really started to see, okay, there's a lot of people that are using this product, this plant, to help them with certain ailments. And I started to really think about cannabis. And I got an opportunity to join Ascend, Abner Curtin and Frank Perillo, both founders and co-founders. They contacted me about a chief people officer role here. The time, that was about a year and a half ago. I cannot believe it. It's like dog years in cannabis. It feels like 5. But I joined them a year and a half ago, and it really was, Abner says it best, a mom and pop type of HR. They needed somebody to come in and really help us kind of bring HR to the forefront and kind of bring it to the new world, to the 20th century. So I've been at Ascend. I've been here about a year and a half, and I'm the chief people officer right now. We have almost 2,000 people, 22 dispensaries, gearing up to about 400 million in revenue. And that's my story.
That's impressive. And thank you for sharing the personal story as, it affecting the lives of people we love. Jamie, please.
Sure. I'm Jamie Mendola. I am the head of strategy and mergers and acquisitions for Air Wellness. I'm part of the co-founding team. I've been at Air for about 4.5 years since its inception. Prior to cannabis, I spent most of my career in the investing world, working my way up through private equity and hedge funds, and ultimately launched my own fund back in 2014. And as the California market transitioned or started transitioning from medical to adult use, I started looking at the opportunity from an investment perspective. And along that same path, similar to Robin, both my parents had longstanding illnesses. My mom had MS, my dad had cancer. They were floundering around with various cocktails of Western medicine and the side effects associated with those that were really impacting their quality of life. And so they became early adopters towards trying to use medical cannabis to help with their symptoms. And that really was eye-opening for me, because at that point, I was not necessarily a huge user of cannabis. I think my consumption over the last 5 years has more than made up for the years that I was not a big consumer. But it really opened up the opportunity of this being a wellness opportunity, not something that was about getting people high. And so I had the opportunity to join John Sandelman and the team when we started AIR, and have really been responsible for a lot of the growth initiatives. We're now in about 9 states. We have about 3,000 employees, and we'll be over $500 million of revenue by the end of the year. Separately, I'm also on the board of Glasshouse Group, which is one of the largest vertical operators in California, and previously was on the board of Moniker Group, which is an alternative travel company very similar to a search engine for on a B2B basis, similar to Airbnb. So the technology that connects alternative lodging accommodations to wholesale providers.
Thanks for giving us our overview. So kind of as an illustration, we're being joined by around 100 individuals, already in industry, many outside, multi-state operator, single state operator, brand, third-party vendor. We're also being joined by a lot of students, USC Marshall, UCLA School of Management, as well as Columbia Business School. And so I think the thing that's on everyone's mind, both in and out of cannabis, is just the very notion of governance. Both of you have exceptional skill and experience outside the scope and legacy industry. And then coming into cannabis, it's interesting. It feels so reminiscent of those legacy industries, yet at the same time, I mean, it's basically an old practice, yet new science. In terms of what constitutes an effective board of directors in cannabis, what's been your experience in terms of what you've seen and what you've experienced? I mean, Robin, what in terms of your experience for structure and format, what have you seen that's made an effective board?
You know, it's been interesting at Ascend because I joined 2 months before they went public. 2 months before we IPO'd. So once we IPO'd, you've got to structure your compensation and governance committee, your audit committee, the board, and you need independence. So we had to kind of structure it. At the time that I came in, we brought in a third independent into the board. And really, it's somebody you want to make sure that are separate from the people that are running the company. We certainly have 2 people, 2 executives, the founders and co-founders are sitting on our board, but we have 3 independents that are on our board, and they have to be a lead independent chair, as well as we have to have a lead in comp and a lead in audit. So I think that's really important how we set it up. And then the second piece of that is how your charter is set up and your bylaws. Very, very important, because it will come back to, you go back to them often, especially in the comp committee. That's what I deal with mainly, is the compensation committee. Most head of HRs are the liaison between the comp chair and the company. And I go back to the charter often to say, okay, what is it that we said we were going to do in this committee? What are we going to deliver? When do we need to deliver them? What's the cadence in the agenda of that committee, from succession planning to talent to benchmarking to comp plans, to all of the things that committee wanted me to do. Now, some of the independents that are on the board, certainly in cannabis, that's where I think, I don't know what Jamie will say, but that's where I think it can be challenging, because there are a fiduciary responsibility of the board members, and there's risk associated with a product that is still federally illegal, unfortunately. So, you have board members that have to really take a look at, do they want a board seat? Do they want to be on the board? Do they want to be on the board of this very could be risky company, risky product? And you tend to get board members that are either in this space or classmates or friends of people in this space. So I think as we evolve in cannabis, I think the stigma is starting to fade away. We start to chip away with it every single day. And I think we'll open up ourselves to bring a lot more diversity into those board members.
Jamie, please.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, you know, the first step is really constructing the board and finding a group of individuals. Obviously, you have to deal with, you know, the independence and the appropriate structure of the board itself. But then it's going to the capabilities, the resumes, and the skill sets of the folks, and make sure that you have a well-rounded group of individuals that can be subject matter experts or overall mentors, you know, to the folks running the business on a day-to-day basis, both in terms of holding them accountable, but also helping them with strategic growth opportunities. And so that might look something like someone that's an expert. Obviously, you need to have a real finance and audit and accounting expert to lead the audit committee. You probably want someone in sales, marketing, branding, someone in real estate, someone strong in finance. And then there's some other skill sets that you can fill in the gaps. One of the things that is opening up, I think 3 years ago, is a lot harder to find board members. That stigma is fading, but there still are some real restrictions from some of these individuals' employers, particularly if they're employed full-time for, let's say, a Fortune 500 company. Most of those executives need to get pre-approved from their executive team or from their board to take an outside board position. And there still is some resistance or reluctance from Johnson & Johnson or Wells Fargo to allow some of their, you know, senior executives to take board seats in cannabis. I think that is fading by the day, and the number of qualified individuals that want to be trailblazers in a real growth industry that see the light or have had those personal experiences, you know, continues to grow. So I'm very optimistic on the talent that will be available for boards. And most of these companies have only been public for 2 to 4 years, right? So all of these companies are really transitioning from private to public, getting best in class in governance and reporting. And I think there's a real two-way onus on both the board members and the company to provide the appropriate information so that board members can be engaged and have the tools and the KPIs to measure and evaluate the business. And also for the companies to solicit the expertise from the board members, particularly outside of the biggest decisions, which are always going to be on the table at these board meetings, but really for that advice. There's a lot of talent that's available from these board members. And I think trying to figure out how to access that and to let them, you know, under the hood to add the most amount of value possible is obviously the hardest thing to do, but something that is probably being underutilized by a large number of these companies today.
That's really good. I mean, you bring up a really interesting point, which is, you know, we have to state it very emphatically and clearly that this is still fairly prohibited. So the risk profile of seemingly that something is still familiar to people outside the space, it's hard to rectify that just based off talking about the growth trajectory of a space like ours. But more importantly, it's also kind of a reconciliation of just, I mean, you're talking about decades of social stigma being very pervasive and being, you know, appropriated in public service announcements. So it's hard to actually kind of not just talk about what this is going to be as a space and as an industry, but to your point, it's also really challenging to broker familiarity with something that a lot of people know firsthand, but seemingly don't know how it operates as a business. I'm kind of curious in terms of, you know, the intersection with HR and governance and boards. You know, boards typically scrutinize a lot of macroeconomic variables, changing interest rates, inflation, economic growth forecasts. The human capital element, you know, before we jumped on here, we talked about the fact that there's not a global consensus on how to grow cannabis. At the same time, though, we're using architecture from legacy industries to inform a process to create something that feels and has the take of industries that we're still familiar with. But human capital, the skills that are necessary, the insights that are needed, not just at the board level, but at, you know, high, mid-tier, and lower level. How can boards, you know, in working with HR and vice versa, HR working with boards, stay abreast of the skills and the attributes that make for a thriving workforce? Jamie, let's start with you this time.
Sure. I mean, look, I think one thing that a board can do is really to analyze the talent that's inside these cannabis companies and really have transparent conversations on where the gaps may be. There's always difficult conversations on, you know, like any industry, some of the early employees are not necessarily the right people to scale businesses as they become more, large scale execution opportunities as opposed to more entrepreneurial pursuits. So trying to figure out how to balance that transition, really thinking through the right mix of legacy cannabis talent, people that have been in the industry for a number of years and know how to grow cannabis, know how to extract and some of the industry specific things, with folks that maybe have a more sophisticated mindset on e-commerce or brand architecture or marketing. And we've all seen both successes and failures out of some of those amazing resumes from the CPG or manufacturing world that want to come into cannabis. And so one of the things I look for more now after being in the industry for a number of years are some of the softer characteristics around grit and entrepreneurship and people that can actually get stuff done as opposed to needing an infrastructure of 50 people under them. Because if you've been in a senior level at a Fortune 500 company, you're a manager, right? And you have large organizations and you're trying to manage people. I think in the cannabis space, these companies are closer to startups than sophisticated companies. And so it's people that can manage people and process, but also get stuff done. And you have to find people that embrace, both sides of those, scale opportunities.
Robin, please.
So true. Yeah, I mean, Jamie, so true. I mean, for us, you look at, so if I think about the board and talent, so what we've done here at Ascend is we really brought the 9-box concept. So anybody familiar with the 9-box concept, it basically is potential and performance. And we looked at our talent, and we had to be it is a very entrepreneurial environment. It's very quick, it's very nimble, it's very flexible. We looked at the 9-box and we said, you know what, we should probably just get really quick into talent and figure out who's red, yellow, green. Like who is going to be okay, who's not going to be okay, who's just doing, hitting it out of the park every single day. Some of the legacy won't be able to scale. It really is a good kind of blunt instrument to get in deep into our talent to say, okay, what is it that we need? And then how do we develop a high potential program around the people that we want to see go further? How do we develop a program like Ascend U that people can take coursework to help with their opportunities or development areas? And really, we share this to the board on a quarterly basis. So we say, okay, here's our people, here's our percentages, here's where we're going, here's where there's massive gaps, if there is any, in our business, and really what we need to go after to recruit from. Jamie's point, cannabis is a very startup, entrepreneurial, nimble, gritty type of organization in most. I can only speak for Ascend, but it's kind of, head down, you've got to roll up your sleeves, where some of these bigger organizations and people have amazing resumes, it's resource rich. It's very resource rich. You have a ton of people underneath you. You're not actually doing it. You're leading it. You're directing it. You're creating strategy. That's all well and good. But in our organization, you have to be a doer. You've got to be able to get into these facilities or get into these sites or get into the business model and really perform the work. Because, people, it's funny, people I interview think it's, oh, okay, this is going to be great. It's the green wave. Yeah, it's great, but it is really hard work. And it's work that most people don't have a lot of tenure in. So everyone's trying to figure it out. And cultivators are a bit like creative designers. They're artists. And they're a very interesting population to work with as well. And people that do it well, do it really well. And that's what's growing your product and growing your plant. So I think the board really gets involved in those type of aspects. It's where's your talent in some of these key operational, plant growing facilities. I think that's where our board has been really honed in on.
Yeah, it's a really good kind of illustration, which is you can't simply just superimpose expertise from other industries. What we're really talking about is a mentality to complement just how seemingly fast it's moving, how sophisticated it has to be, the compliance, the insights that you need on an active basis. As markets, they're not just open, they're developing. Regulatory changes, legislative processes, new market participants. It's a very dynamic experience. One of the things I'm curious about is expectations, as things develop, as we're going through the process of qualifying those outside and in the space to propel them further. What are some of the ways in which HR leaders can really, let's just put it this way, in terms of 3 things, what are three of the things primarily that a board of directors can expect from HR to really complement that process?
I mean, I can speak for what I do and what I think my board is looking for is, look, be fair and transparent. Like, tell me what's going on, be transparent, be fair in your thought process, kind of right down the fairway. What is it that you think in regards to the organization, the company, the talent, et cetera? Show us where there's opportunities. I think our board, we're a very robust group, and I think they want to be open, and they're investors. They're investors in our company. They want to know where are you, what are you working on, and where do you think you're going? I think they want to know about culture. Our board is really interested on culture. So, look, a lot of the cannabis companies, I'll only speak to Ascend, but I think that we've had our opportunity in culture, because you're running so fast to speed and scale that you forget about the little things that develop into a culture. And some of the feelings of what the associates feel or what the managers feel kind of bubble up into culture. So I think that's been a really big focus for us. Is, okay, tell me, be fair and transparent. Tell me what the culture is in the company and our values, and then tell me about talent. I want to know about talent. Where are you? What are you doing about it? Where are you recruiting? Where are we great? Where are we lacking? I mean, I think those are the three big things that and are we leading the pack, or are we not leading the pack? Like, if I'm going to roll out a short-term incentive program or a long-term incentive program, my one board member will say, are we the beacon? Are we going to be leading the pack, or are we behind the pack? So I think that's really interesting stuff too from the board.
Jim,
Sure.
do you
Look, I'm not an HR, executive, right? But I obviously interface with our HR team, and from the board or even senior management perspective, I think I do have a perspective on what the needs are for high quality, senior HR representatives. I would say one is be someone that can look introspectively at the organization and critically and say, here's where I see the talent gaps. Here where I think we have great performers versus where we're lagging. And also utilize in combination with operating team, what are the KPIs, right? I feel like a little too loosey-goosey evaluation sometimes of these companies. There are now enough data points about what are best-in-class yields of a cultivation facility. How do you measure brand strength? What's good retail dispensary performance? How do we compare our margins versus our peers? And so we're getting to the point where we're not just in such mega growth phase that the numbers start speaking, for themselves. And that becomes one way to really hold people accountable, like every other industry. And so working to define what those scorecards are for the appropriate roles and providing some of those heat maps on where there's opportunities to upgrade or augment the folks that we have in place. Two, while not focused on the C-suite, the reality is, 80% of our employees work in the field, probably making less than $30 an hour, right? These are the people that are delivering the customer experience, that are actually growing and tending to the plants in the facility. They are so important. And like other aspects of the economy, talent acquisition is extremely hard. Turnover, is elevated. We're in this war, of talent, particularly for those types of folks. And so then it comes down to culture, career opportunities, training and talent development. And so you're not going to do that on a day-to-day basis, but you need to make sure those senior management teams are very focused, rewarded and evaluated on what they're doing, in the field. Because you can have the best C-suite in the world. If you don't have it right at the dispensary and the grower level, it doesn't matter, right? And then the third piece, I think, is thinking through succession planning. As we did our prep call, I think probably 80% of the CEOs in this industry are the founders, and many of them, have multiple voting shares. Many of them, this is, some at various points in their career. But, like any tech entrepreneur or software entrepreneur, there needs to be succession planning, whether that's the emergency, what happens if something really bad happens, who's going to step in, to the, how do we see this playing out over the next 5 years as we become $1 billion plus company and the needs and skills of that leader ultimately change. And, there are very few leaders in this entire sector at the CEO level that have actually been there and done that on the manufacturing or supply chain side at earlier points in their career. There's a lot of super smart, folks that are entrepreneurial or have had success managing money or real estate or mortgages. And there's a lot of super smart people for sure. But a lot of those people, if you presented the resume of their backgrounds today for $1 billion business getting bigger, you wouldn't say those are always the right people to manage the next phase of growth. And so you can supplement that with really strong COOs and chief marketing officers and whatnot. But I think really having the view of where you want to be as an organization, T plus 5 years, and then backfilling what those talent needs are today and, along that journey.
I mean, it's a good illustration of just kind of the vigilance that you need. I mean, besides the fact that this, this space is in so many ways high risk experimentation, to your point, there are a lot of folks that are being tested, but that doesn't mean that they have the experience to actually be able to continuously develop something that requires so much insight, being inundated with so much information on a recurring basis in a changing space. I mean, this is kind of a larger question, but in terms of the scope and the direction of where the space is going, what do you foresee in the next short while? Not just from a board capacity, not just from an HR capacity, but as people inside the space, where do you think cannabis is going in the next several years? And can we prepare for that? How do we prepare for that? Robin, please.
I was like, I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I knew, Mike, right? Because we're all talking about safe banking. We're all talking about, interstate commerce. We're all talking about overturning the Controlled Substance Act, in which listing it as a type 1. These are some big things for cannabis. I don't think that's going to happen in the short term. That's my personal opinion. I don't think it's going to happen in the short term. I think that Cory Booker's, has bent a little on his stance on social equity. I think we've seen some movement in the Senate. I think there's some interesting things happen there. I think is it going to push forward? Is it going to, I think for the Senate to be talking about it, at least for there to be a committee in regards about it, I think we've made movement. I think if you look at cannabis, though, it is going to be one of those, growing industries and markets. We do hiring fairs. As you guys know, we use FlowerHire all the time, but we do hiring fairs and we have hundreds of people that show up that want a job in cannabis. This is one of the industries that we are employing people at a good rate of pay. It's not, the best, but it's certainly not minimum wage. And it's a good rate of pay. And they're doing what they love. They're growing plants, they're selling the product. And I think what it's going to do is it's really going to, and I still believe it, like my whole reason to get into cannabis was to break legacy thinking around weed. No, it's recreational and it's medicine. And I think once we relieve that stigma and shift that paradigm in people's minds, I think A, the industry will take off. I think B, you'll get more quality of talent that comes into the industry because they'll be less concerned about how it looks on their resume. I've had some executives, how am I going to look at my resume? I see that less and less, but it's still there. I think I would love to see that shift in cannabis. I would love to see cannabis really be like a spirit, like a big type of company like that. I don't want to name a company, but like a spirit type of company. It'll be either, people can walk in. If you walk into our store in Paramus, I live right here. That's why I have many friends that go, my God, it's like an Apple store. It is. It's like an Apple store for weed, for cannabis. It is really cool. It is great. Ways to order it. I think more and more as we evolve and people start to learn about it, I think the stigma goes away. I think the noise goes away. And I would say let the states decide. I think that would be the next thing kind of as we look forward.
Yeah, look, I think in terms of what's going on in the market, anyone who's been following cannabis understands that it's getting more competitive. There's some price compression. And so I think for a number of years, this industry was really about growth, entering new states, revenues, bringing facilities online. I think the next stage is really going to be operational efficiency, creating real brands and higher quality products, and running a better and tighter business. So I think the demand for folks that are Six Sigma black belt experts and supply chain experts and people that really know how to activate brands. I think some of the talent out of California probably still needs to migrate into the East Coast to the Midwest in terms of the capabilities of producing high quality products. There simply is not enough high quality cultivation talent, to seed all the different facilities across the country. And while it's great to have, we have an amazing head grower, he can't be everywhere at once. And so then it becomes about, SOPs and really training people up. But I think there's an opportunity to continue to, up our game on that front. But it's really the traditional metrics of a retail and manufacturing business. The amount of data that we're using on customer acquisition, on personalized marketing and loyalty, about driving costs down so that our profitability can withstand the price compression going on in the industry. I think a lot of these things are just borrowing a lot of playbooks that have happened in retail and CPG and manufacturing over the last 20 and 30 years, and taking it to an industry that was run effectively by entrepreneurs and folks that maybe didn't have as much of a traditional business background. So I think it's really going to be about that those efficiencies and getting your business into a place that can compete in an ever so competitive environment.
I think those are my formal questions. So for the last 10 some odd minutes, we're actually going to go to the Q&A. Let's see. There's a whole raft of them. I mean, this is actually a very good question because I think, it's about culture. It's actually from Anthony Sinella. I think it's a very good question because a lot of the defining characteristics of cannabis, I think we all can say this, which is when you enter this space, it's a very visceral experience in terms of whom you get to meet. I mean, in the same way that a lot of the founders and the executives, you can walk at a single conference and meet with, in mere moments, several of the largest providers in the space very quickly. And more importantly, there's a lot of open speak between not just colleagues, but also competitors in many instances. And one of the things that can be a defining characteristic is something that both Jamie and Robin, you both mentioned, which is culture. In terms of approaches and being successful at improving and amplifying and producing better culture and then reducing turnover rates, what are some of the things that folks in the audience can think about and institute and instill in their workforce to really propel culture? Because I think that's the most consequential element. Robin, please.
Yeah, it's a great question, Anthony. I've done culture in my past, and it's funny, like you do it and it exists and it breeds, and then you walk away and it falls down. So like that was one of the big takeaways for me, is like, how do you create culture and then let it stand up and let it sustain? So for us at Ascend, certainly we had to get some things in place, and one of it was, okay, how do we make this the best place to work in cannabis and then the best place to work in retail wholesale? So that's kind of my mission. So it starts with the work environment, benefits, what we're offering to the associates, the work environment, the give back to the associates. So I kind of revamped the entire benefits program. That was probably the easiest of the bunch. We released an employee engagement survey, because the only way you're really going to figure out culture is to understand what from bottoms up, like what is it that the associates in the stores and the sites in the facilities are saying or feeling or needing or wanting to make this a great place to work. So I usually ask 3 questions. Why did you come here? What keeps you here? And if you were the CEO, what would you do differently? We hold roundtables, we hold town halls on a monthly basis. I'm going out tomorrow to launch a town hall tour in Michigan. We go and we talk and we figure out what is it that we need to do to make this the best place to work. Is it developing your career? Is it career pathing? Is it more PTO? What is it that we're missing? Because we are still a startup. You got to remember, when people come, they're very excited about what they're doing and they have a connection to the cannabis, the plant. So we have to fulfill the other piece of it. Make this a great place to work and a place where I can develop my career. We started launching the hypo program. So if we identified you as somebody we think could be a general manager for our store, we put you in a 10-week program with guest lecturers to include Abner and Frank and finance and Dan Neville, our CFO. So we're really trying to give back, but we need some sort of communication platform to help culture, an engagement survey to help culture, and then action planning with OKRs against it. And we have put everybody's OKRs as part of their goals is culture. So it starts at the top. It has to start at the top. I've got Abner and Frank's ear on it. And we have it kind of trickling down, but we really have been thinking about it, doing it, making it part of our everyday OKRs.
I think for us, some of those similar tactics, I think the town halls have been very effective on creating a closer bond between the folks in the C-suite and the folks in the field, because they like and don't always hear the strategy or what's going on in other states or how everything's interconnected. And so that I think that does actually increase loyalty. We've done a much better job of soliciting feedback and making those folks feel heard. And some of that can be done through surveys or town halls or Q&As, but some of it is the senior folks going and spending time in the field and talking to them. And next week I'm spending a week in Arizona bud tending. And I can tell you, number one, I'm going to learn a ton, but number two, you're going to have such a sense of loyalty from those folks because you're going to hear any pain points about fulfillment or the break room being too small or issues with the POS system, all these things that never really bubble up, to the C-suite, but just having people feel heard. And there's a lot of talent and knowledge. They are touching the consumers every day. So yes, we see the data, but let me tell you what, you talk to an assistant store manager, she can tell you what products that we should bring in the store better than our best data analyst, right? And so it's really utilizing a hybrid approach between the traditional tools and really talking and trying to scale and amplify the voices of the folks that are closest to our patients and customers. Obviously, we've done a good job, I think, of trying to create career paths and utilizing, I think when we first started, we didn't even really have that much of a learning management platform. And so it was hard for people to see what the path was, or sometimes we'd elevate star performers, and the success rate of them being all-stars at that next level was not as high as it should be, because we realized we weren't giving them all of the resources and support and training to be, let's say, an assistant store manager versus a lead bud tender, right? There's a different level of skill set around accounting or procurement or other functional roles that they may not have had. And so you have to provide the tools to those folks, to keep them engaged and put them in a position, to succeed. So those are the things I think most of the major companies at this point have done a pretty good job on benefits. And, there's a lot of workarounds that have to happen to manage, best-in-class healthcare and 401ks and everything else. But I think by and large, those problems are more or less, fixed. It's not quite as easy if we weren't in cannabis, but I think that's not, so much of an impediment at this point. And I do think people are passionate. They want to work in cannabis. They would work in cannabis all day long over Starbucks or, Nike or whatever else. This is what these folks want to do. And so treating them well and giving them opportunities will increase job satisfaction, decrease turnover, and create, someone put in the Q&A, the vibe of culture. That's totally right. Culture is what the vibe is. And so I think that doesn't happen top down. It happens organically by how people feel and how they're being treated. And you have to use a array of tools to try to optimize that experience for your folks in the field.
I believe, Melissa, are we at time? I don't want to go over.
We have, no, that's good. We have time for one more question. There's one here from Lauren. Do you have any suggestions for offering higher quality benefits such as 401k or similar to attract talent given the issues with cannabis not being federally legal?
Well, great question, Lauren. At Ascend, we have a 401k. So you're able to work around some things with the 401k that is purely legal. And we're able to offer 401k. We rolled it out right after IPO. So we, a little less than maybe a year now. We are looking at doing a match next year. We wanted to kind of get the plan in place, see how many people were using the plan. We also have some other benefits, and a lot of them are, we have healthcare with we have a medical benefit with United Healthcare. We have a dental benefit with United Healthcare. We have a short-term disability program. We have life insurance. We have what other companies, I would put it right up against the other companies I work for. We have great benefits that are very good coverage. We have a 401k. We're going to be rolling out an employee stock purchase plan where you could purchase Ascend stock at a discount if you're an employee, because everyone wants to be a shareholder. So I think that there's a lot of things you can do to really have higher quality benefits. I came and kind of revamped the whole thing and pushed the needle on a lot. There are companies that will not work with cannabis. Yes, there are some, but most will. United Healthcare, the Blues will work with you. There's 401k workarounds. There are platforms like the Fidelity of the worlds won't work with employee stock purchase plans, but we have one that's called Siebert that will, and McDonald's is on that. Starbucks, I believe, is on that. So there are companies every day that are opening up their doors to work with cannabis.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think at this point, it's not really that much of a friction point, and it's very powerful to discuss that with potential employees, never mind your current employees, because that's always something on their mind is, I'm coming from this traditional company. What are my benefits? What's the healthcare going to look like for my family? And when you're like, I'm on United or Cigna, and we have a 401k, and you have that, it literally is just about the same as any company I've worked for in the past. And so I think at this point, which is different than 4 or 5 years ago, there's no distinguishable difference. There's a couple different counterparties and some of the subsector specialties, but I think that we can be very competitive with non-cannabis companies at this point.
Yeah, I agree.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jamie, Robin, and Mike so much for being here today and being a part of this growing community and helping shape the industry and the future of it. Just so everyone knows, we will be sending the recording out to everyone by the end of the week. And we hope to see you at the next one. So hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all so much.
Take care.